Oh, hey guys, it's your boy Zero here. Welcome back to another edition of Zero's Maverick Hunting. Sorry I'm out of breath. I was running away from some virus zombie anomalies, similar to what you'd find in games like Resident Evil, but we're not actually talking about that game today. We're going to be talking about Extermination on the PS2.
Extermination was one of the first survival horror games for the PS2, released on March 8th, 2001 in Japan, and later June for Europe and July for North America.
Huh. For once, North America got snubbed on a release instead of Europe.
The game was originally pitched for the Sega Dreamcast and as a sequel to the Sega Saturn's Deep Fear, but Sega didn't approve of the game as the developer Deep Space was still a smaller time development house, and Extermination had strayed enough from Deep Fear that they probably felt the connection was kind of weak.
Despite Deep Fear being translated into English, it wasn't released in North America, only in Europe. Damn it! Double snubbed.
Extermination was also used early on to show the power of the PS2, primarily to show how the survival horror genre will look on the platform.
I'm actually able to play this game because my friend Matt has loaned it to me. So thanks, Matt. Where do you keep finding these weird games?
Also, you may notice my game footage runs at 30 frames per second. The game does run at 60 frames per second, but for some reason my capture card locks the 480i signal from my PS2 to 30 frames, and I have no idea why. It doesn't act this way with any other console that I've tested. In any case, please keep this in mind when watching this review.
Anyways, let's not delay any further. Let's take a look at Extermination on the PS2.
The game starts off with a cutscene of our protagonist, Dennis Riley, having a chat with his friend Roger. They reminisce about their friend they lost in battle until they drop onto the Arctic base. From here you are introduced to the game's controls and mechanics, and yeah, certainly feels like an early 2000s game, camera controls and all. To be fair, you can control the camera when aiming and even use quick aim to recenter it, but it's still got that early PS2 jank. Once you get finished out here, you enter the facility and oh my god, it's infested with mutant zombies! Well, it was the era of copying Resident Evil, and considering this was initially a sequel to Deep Fear, which itself was kind of a ripoff of Resident Evil, I'm not surprised. Back to the game, we get separated from our partner and finally run into Cindy Chen, who was Andrew's girlfriend, that friend that got KIA'd. Turns out she wants nothing to do with us, so we continue our way around the frigid lab base, learning things about the experiments that took place here. Eventually we find a safe house with a game area and bar and meet up with Cindy again, and another character, Sonia Leone, pounding back some wine. We make it to the helicopter only to be told by Major Mike Madigan to search the facility for our comrades, as the building itself is set to be self-destructed to avoid the virus from spreading. If it seems like I'm speeding through the story, it's because of two reasons. One, I'm trying not to spoil the whole game, and two, most of the story beats can be chopped up to this is Resident Evil in the Arctic. Besides, this isn't a long game, there's a full long play on YouTube that did it in just over 5 hours, and I'd rather you experience it for yourself rather than me going over every story beat. The long and short of it is, if you like the campiness of the late 90s survival horror games like Resident Evil, you'll probably enjoy this game. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk about the gameplay. I mentioned before that it has the distinctive early 2000s feel, and while not tank controls like horror games of old, it's not quite as fluid as games of today. The biggest issue is the lack of camera control. The closest the game gets to is the two aiming methods. Luckily, you do get scopes that have lock-on abilities, so that can help when in combat, but outside of combat, be prepared to hit those aiming controls to line up your view. X functions as the all-around action button. It is used for rolling and interacting. The square and circle buttons are used for knife strikes, and while in an aiming mode, it's used for primary and alternate fire. Triangle is the primary menu button. You can control Dennis by using either the D-pad or left analog stick. This is useful as I found using the analog stick more accurate for moving him around, while in tight spaces like the air vents, the game goes into a dungeon crawling mode and the D-pad works better for this. The D-pad also works great for when lining up to do certain platforming jumps. The right analog stick is not used. I know that using a dual analog setup for movement and camera was still a new thing at the time, but really guys? You couldn't have used this for the camera controls instead? Onto the gameplay, it plays similarly to a tank control style. Movement is free, however, once you aim, you're locked in place and are free to use your guns, of which there are a few. Your standard rifle has a refillable mag that can be expanded by finding upgrades or recharged at ammo recharge stations. You can also acquire a shotgun, flamethrower, grenade launcher, and unlock a missile launcher if you find all the parts for it. These weapons are not recharged at recharge stations, so use them sparingly. Luckily, ammo can be found all around the facility, so there's plenty of opportunities to stock up. Speaking of stocking up, let's talk about the health and infection system. You have a health meter which goes from 0 to 100. Obviously, when you get hit by an enemy, you take damage, but you can also be infected. How infection works is depending on how hard you're hit, the infection rating can go up. Constant hits can increase the percentage until you hit 100% and become completely infected. When this happens, your max health drops to 60, and you rapidly take damage indicated by a blur effect on the screen and by controller rumble. Water also causes Dennis to stagger, as water is how the virus is spread. There are a few ways to remove the infection. For starters, if you're between 20 and 95%, the infection will slowly over time reduce itself till it's gone. However, it takes a long time before even a 5% drop occurs, so this is not recommended. You can also use MTS vaccines at MTS machines to completely cure Dennis from infection, as well as get his health fully restored. This is the only way to remove the infection if you're 100% infected. On top of all that, vaccines and health packs can be found, but they are limited, so they need to be used sparingly. Also, this game has falling damage, which can result in instant death. Fun. Conserving ammo, health, and vaccine aren't your only things to worry about though. The game also gives you a battery pack that you need to manage. This battery pack is used for various functions, from opening certain doors to saving the game. Saving takes 2 bars of energy, while other functions vary. You start off with a battery that has only 4 bars, but eventually you get upgrades for 16 and 24 bars, so luckily it does get easier to manage. You can only charge batteries at battery charge stations, which are available in most safe rooms. The game gives 5 saves per memory card, so it's easy to rotate saves. We'll be coming back to this eventually. The enemy types you come into combat with are all viral mutations of some kind. First off, you have these small leech-like face hugger style things, and I freaking hate them. They're really small, making it hard to aim at, and they shoot infectious acid. They can also grab onto you and infect you that way too. They're weak and can be taken out with only a few shots, but they were my main frustration when playing, as they caused me to get infected the easiest. You also come across the standard zombie dogs, hunter ripoffs, weird mutant dudes with gun turrets for arms, mutated gun turrets themselves, regular gun turrets, and even goo on the ground that can trap you. On top of all that, the water has been infected, so we get to contend with the water monster from the abyss. Bosses are really cool in this game and are very challenging to boot. Overall, this game has a lot of enemies to deal with, and they're pretty good. Presentation-wise, this game looks pretty dang good for an early PS2 game. Graphically, it's about on par with other games from the time, and its visuals still hold up today. The water and snow effects look particularly good, if not a product of their time. The game was used primarily to show off the advanced lighting effects of the PS2. Personally, I think Bloody Roar 3 did a better job of this, but it's still impressive. The models have a decent amount of polygons, but they still have that PS1-ish feeling, and the faces are pretty flat. Lip sync is all over the place, but that was typical of the time. Speaking of, the voice acting is standard for the time as well, meaning it's pretty bad. But if you're a fan of this genre, it's to be expected, and in some instances, it's hilarious. Sound effects work pretty well. Monster sounds and gunshots do sound convincing, as well as most of the sound effects in general. The music is also pretty good. While some tracks are kind of boring, many of the tracks are heart-pounding and heavy based on the situation. Especially the infection track, as it really brings the urgency of it all. Before we end off this review, I have a slight confession to make. I wasn't able to complete this game. Now, before you go in the comments giving me another lecture on why I shouldn't have even bothered with this review, hear me out. Midway through the game, there are 2 big sections you need to cross in order to gain access to labs 1 and 2. You need access to them because 2 of the detonators for the self-destruct sequence are located in these areas. Each lab has major corridors leading up to it filled to the brim with enemies. On top of all that, the labs themselves are small areas also filled with enemies. Did I mention the lack of saving options in these segments? It was one of the main factors that contributed to me being unable to complete the game. Many times I had to choose. Do I sacrifice my progress and risk dying? Or do I use my dwindling resources to make it further only to backtrack to the safe room in Area B? Needless to say, I picked the latter, probably at a detriment to my progress, but if I can be real with you all, I'm new to survival horror games. I only recently in the last 3 to 4 years started playing them, and even then, I usually play them with other people. Anytime I've gone on my own, well, I do okay, but not great. I did beat D though. Man, that story was garbage. I did get as far as one of the later bosses, but I was so strapped for health items by then I didn't even stand a chance. I'm sure if I keep at it, I can pass this boss without taking much damage, but I just don't have the time or patience for that right now. I considered stopping this review and starting the game over, but I'd already put nearly 5 hours of in-game time and 9 hours of recording time into this game. I know I've said before, it's not necessary to beat a game to review it, but I really tried with this game, and my lack of experience with the genre, especially for older survival horror games, started to show as I played on. It really hurt to stop playing as I looked ahead at a long play and saw some of the later boss fights, and they look so cool. I really want to play them, but I already take forever to make reviews as it is, and I really need to give this game back to Matt. I've had it for like 2, maybe even 3 years at this point. In any case, I feel like I've played enough of this game to formulate an opinion on it, and hopefully my lack of progress doesn't turn you off from my thoughts on it. That being said, how did Extermination fare? Honestly, it's not bad. The game plays well enough, and the only times it was irritating was from my own lack of skill. There wasn't any major glitches or busy work that ruined the experience, though that middle section is tough for newbies like me. The story is generic even by the standards at the time. Resident Evil makes this shit look easy. But I also never minded the story either. The game overall is average as far as survival horror games are concerned, but is it worth playing today? I'd say if you're a fan of survival horror games like Resident Evil and B-grade games from the genre such as Cold Fear, D2, or Fear Effect, then you'll probably like this one. It seems that critics and gamers at the time agree with my sentiments, as the game received average to positive reviews. The game sold about 550,000 copies worldwide, with 210,000 in North America, 160,000 in Europe, and 120,000 in Japan, among sales in other regions. Despite the sales and being a Sony exclusive, the game was never available as a greatest hit. Luckily, the game isn't super rare. It's more uncommon, so a copy will run you around the $20 range. I actually found a copy in pretty good condition with the manual for $10 from Iceman Games of all places. If you can get the game for a good price, it is definitely worth it.
Anyways, guys, that's going to do it for this episode of Zero's Maverick Hunting. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got some zombies to kill. Huh. I guess that's what you call an extermination. See you next time.
Hey guys, thanks for watching my Halloween review on Extermination. A big thanks to my pal Matt for lending me this game, and to all those who submitted cameos for this review. Go check them out. Also, gotta give a shout out to my patrons here on screen, and if you'd like to support me for $1 Canadian a month and get early access to videos, behind the scenes extras, and much more, consider backing me on Patreon. Liked this content? Why not subscribe for more and hit that bell to get notifications? And don't forget to like and share this video if it tickles your fancy. If you want to keep up to date with my content, you can follow me on Facebook at Zeromaster fan page, follow me on Twitter at Zeromaster, and follow me on twitch.tv/Zeromaster, where I stream every Tuesday and Thursday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Still got a sweet tooth for more content? Well, I got you covered. On the left will be another one of my reviews, and on the right, check out my pal One Roll's video on the closed beta for Project Resistance, a Resident Evil multiplayer game. Thanks again for watching, and have a happy Halloween.